His SEAL dog kept clawing at the barn floor until they uncovered the secret that got his father killed. After 7 years away, homeless former Navy SEAL Ethan Mercer returned to Bitter Creek Ranch, planning to sell it before the memories destroyed him for good. But the moment his retired military K9, Titan, stepped into the snow-covered barn, the dog refused to leave. Then came the hidden trapdoor, the missing flood records, and the truth buried beneath the Montana mountains that powerful men were willing to kill for. Comment 1 if you'd fight for your family's land no matter what, or 0 if you'd walk away, and tell us where you're watching from. The storm came down hard over western Montana like the sky itself had split open. Snow blasted sideways across the empty highway, burying the road faster than the state plows could clear it. Pine trees bent beneath the violent wind, their dark branches thrashing against one another like shadows fighting in the mountains. Somewhere far off beyond the frozen ridges, thunder rolled low and distant beneath the blizzard clouds. Ethan Mercer tightened both hands around the steering wheel of the battered Ford pickup as the truck crawled through the storm. The heater barely worked anymore. Cold air leaked through cracks in the rusted doorframe and drifted across his legs. Every few minutes the engine rattled hard enough to make him wonder if the old truck would finally die somewhere out here in the mountains where nobody would find him until spring thaw. He almost laughed at the thought. Wouldn't be the worst place to disappear. Beside him sat Titan. The massive German shepherd filled nearly the entire passenger seat, his thick sable fur dusted with snow from their last stop hours earlier. One pointed ear twitched constantly, while his amber eyes remained fixed on the white blur ahead of them through the windshield. Titan never slept during storms, not after Afghanistan. Ethan glanced toward the dog briefly. "You can relax," he muttered quietly. "Nobody's shooting at us tonight." Titan didn't move. The dog's gaze stayed forward, calm and watchful, exactly the same way he used to scan rooftops during convoy runs overseas. Some habits never left. Neither did some memories. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in the seat as another sharp ache worked through his shoulder. Old shrapnel damage. The cold always made it worse. 7 years had passed since he'd last stepped foot in Bitter Creek Valley, but his body still carried enough scars to remember every deployment without help. His jaw tightened slightly. The folded foreclosure notice inside his jacket pocket felt heavier than the pistol he no longer carried. Final notice. Property seizure pending. Bitter Creek Ranch. He hadn't opened the letter again since Boise. Didn't need to. The words were already burned into his head. His father's ranch was dying, and Ethan Mercer had come home too late to stop it. The truck climbed another icy curve along the mountain road. Snow swirled violently through the headlights, turning the world outside into a tunnel of white static. For a moment, Ethan's vision drifted. Not to Montana, to somewhere hotter. Dust instead of snow, gunfire instead of wind. A burning vehicle flipped sideways beside a shattered road while screaming echoed through smoke thick enough to choke on. Ethan blinked hard. The mountains returned instantly. His breathing stayed steady, but his grip tightened enough to whiten his knuckles. Titan slowly turned his head toward him. The dog's eyes softened slightly. He knew. He always knew. Ethan exhaled through his nose and rubbed one rough hand across his beard. "I'm good," he said quietly. Titan stared another moment before facing forward again. The storm worsened as darkness settled fully across the mountains. Bitter Creek Valley lay somewhere ahead beyond the ridgeline, hidden beneath miles of snow-covered wilderness and frozen logging roads. Ethan remembered these mountains once. As a boy, he knew every creek crossing, every fence line, every hidden trail through the timber. Now the land felt unfamiliar. Or maybe he did. 7 years ago, he buried both parents within 3 days after the flood tore through the Northern Valley Road. Then he left Montana and never really stopped moving afterward. Security contracts, dock jobs, private transport work, sleeping in cheap motels, truck stops, sometimes shelters, sometimes nowhere at all. The military taught him how to survive almost anywhere. It just never taught him how to come home afterward. The pickup bounced violently as the tires dropped into a pothole buried beneath ice. Titan immediately stiffened. Ethan noticed. "What is it?" The dog's ears lifted sharply now, focused, alert, not fear, detection. Ethan's instincts sharpened automatically. Years in the SEAL teams had trained his body to notice tiny changes before his brain caught up. He eased off the gas pedal slightly while scanning the road ahead through the storm. At first he saw nothing except snow. Then, light. Faint. Barely visible through the trees. Ethan frowned. That wasn't possible. Bitter Creek Ranch had no electricity anymore. The county shut power off almost 2 years ago, according to the bank paperwork. The truck rounded another bend, and suddenly the valley opened below them. Ethan's breath slowed. There it was, Bitter Creek Ranch. Even buried beneath snow and darkness, he recognized it instantly. The old horse barn leaned slightly toward the eastern pasture, exactly like it had when he was 16. Sections of fencing had collapsed entirely beneath heavy drifts. The equipment shed near the frozen creek looked close to caving in. But the farmhouse. Smoke curled from the chimney. Warm yellow light glowed faintly through the downstairs windows. Someone was inside. Ethan stared in disbelief. "Who the hell?" Titan growled softly. Not aggressive, uneasy. The truck rolled slowly down the narrow dirt road toward the ranch yard. Snow crunched beneath the tires while the headlights swept across the property. Something felt wrong immediately. Not abandoned. Maintained. Fresh tire tracks cut through the snow toward the house. Firewood sat stacked neatly beneath a tarp near the porch. One side of the barn had been repaired recently, with newer timber lighter than the original wood. Somebody had been living here. Ethan killed the engine. Silence crashed down around them, except for the screaming wind outside. For several seconds, neither man nor dog moved. Then Titan suddenly stood. Every muscle in his body locked tight, his eyes fixed toward the barn, low growl, deep in his chest. Ethan followed his stare. The barn stood half-hidden behind blowing snow near the eastern pasture fence. Darkness swallowed most of it, except for one weak exterior lantern swaying beside the sliding doors. Titan whined once. That stopped Ethan cold. Titan almost never whined. The dog pushed against the truck door immediately. "Easy." Titan ignored him. His breathing had changed now. Faster. Focused. Like he'd caught a scent. Ethan slowly opened the truck door. The freezing wind slammed into him instantly. Snow whipped across the ranch yard hard enough to sting his face while his boots sank deep into the drift below. Titan jumped down beside him, then froze completely. The German shepherd stared toward the barn without blinking. Not moving, not barking. Just staring. Ethan had seen that posture before. Bomb sweeps, tunnel searches. The moments before, Titan detected something dangerous hidden nearby. "Titan." Nothing. The dog didn't even look at him. A strange chill crawled slowly beneath Ethan's skin that had nothing to do with the cold. The farmhouse door suddenly opened. Warm light spilled across the porch. An elderly woman stepped outside holding an oil lantern against the storm. She froze the second she saw Ethan standing there. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Snow blew violently between them while Titan remained motionless beside the truck, still staring toward the barn. The woman looked frightened but exhausted more than anything else. Her silver-gray hair was tied loosely beneath a wool hood, and her thin frame nearly disappeared inside an oversized winter coat. Then another figure appeared behind her. A teenage boy. 14, maybe 15 years old. Dark hair, thin build, wary eyes. The boy noticed Titan immediately, but Titan never looked back. His eyes remained locked on the barn, like something inside it was waiting. The woman tightened her grip on the lantern. "You're not from Redwater, are you?" Ethan frowned slightly. "No." The woman hesitated. "Then who are you?" The wind howled across Bitter Creek Valley. Ethan slowly reached into his jacket pocket and removed the folded property notice. His eyes drifted briefly toward the ranch house behind them, toward the porch, toward the smoke rising into the storm sky, then back toward the barn where Titan still stood frozen in place. Finally, he answered, "My name's Ethan Mercer." The woman's expression changed instantly. Recognition, shock, and somewhere beneath both, fear. The teenage boy looked between them quietly. Outside, snow continued burying Bitter Creek Ranch beneath darkness, and Titan still refused to leave the barn. The German shepherd stood beside the drifting snow near the truck, completely motionless except for the slow rise and fall of his breathing. Wind tore through his thick fur while his amber eyes remained fixed on the old structure across the yard. Ethan had seen that stare before. The dog only locked onto something like that when every instinct inside him believed danger was nearby, or hidden. The elderly woman on the porch tightened her grip around the lantern again. "You're Ethan Mercer?" she asked quietly over the storm. Ethan nodded once. The teenage boy beside her stared harder now, studying Ethan's face as though trying to compare him to somebody he'd only heard stories about. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the woman glanced nervously toward Titan. "Your dog's been acting strange since sunset." Titan let out another low growl, not toward the house, toward the barn. Ethan finally stepped forward through the deep snow toward the porch. The old wooden steps creaked beneath his boots as he climbed them slowly. Up close, he could see exhaustion written across the woman's face. Deep lines beneath pale blue eyes, thin shoulders hidden under too many layers of clothing. The kind of tired that came from years of surviving instead of living. The boy stood slightly behind her protectively. Ethan noticed immediately. "You live here?" he asked. The woman hesitated before answering. "My name's Naomi Keller." Her voice remained soft but cautious. "And this is my grandson, Luke." Luke gave a small nod without speaking. Naomi swallowed hard. "We didn't know anyone was coming back." Ethan looked past them into the house. Warm firelight flickered against the walls. A cast-iron stove glowed orange near the kitchen. Drying clothes hung beside the heat, while old quilts covered the furniture. The house looked lived in, not stolen from, cared for. That unsettled him more than if the place had been destroyed. Naomi stepped aside slightly. "You should come in before you freeze out there." Ethan glanced back toward Titan. The dog still hadn't moved. "Titan," Ethan called. Nothing. The dog's gaze never left the barn. Luke frowned slightly. "He's been doing that for almost an hour." Ethan slowly walked back toward the edge of the porch. "Titan." This time the German shepherd finally turned his head, but only briefly. Then he looked back toward the barn again. Ethan's stomach tightened. That wasn't normal, not even close. Still, the storm was worsening by the minute. He couldn't stand outside all night. "Stay close," he told the dog quietly. Titan hesitated, then finally trotted through the snow toward the porch, though his ears remained fixed toward the barn the entire time. The second the dog stepped inside the farmhouse, warmth rolled over Ethan like a memory he wasn't ready for. Wood smoke, coffee, old pine floors. For one dangerous second it felt like stepping backward through time, like his mother might still walk out of the kitchen carrying soup while his father laughed somewhere out near the barn. Ethan stopped just inside the doorway. The room blurred briefly. Not from tears, from memory. Titan brushed quietly against his leg, grounding him instantly. Naomi noticed the movement, but said nothing. Luke closed the door against the storm while Ethan slowly removed his gloves. The farmhouse looked smaller than he remembered. Or maybe he'd simply become someone too large for old memories. Naomi motioned toward the fire. "You can warm up." Ethan remained standing. "How long have you been here?" Naomi exchanged a glance with Luke before answering. 3 winters. That surprised him. 3? She nodded slowly. "The first year we only meant to stay a few weeks." Her voice lowered slightly. "Then the roads closed early. After that," she paused, "there wasn't really anywhere left for us to go." Luke stared down at the floorboards quietly. Ethan studied both of them carefully now. Their clothes were clean but worn thin. Naomi's hands trembled faintly near the lantern handle. Luke looked underfed beneath his heavy flannel coat. Not criminals, survivors. Naomi seemed to understand what Ethan was thinking. "We never touched anything that belonged to your family," she said quickly. "Most of the ranch was already falling apart when we found it." Ethan's eyes drifted around the room again, then stopped. Near the fireplace stood an old framed photograph. His parents. Cleaned carefully. Not dusty. His chest tightened unexpectedly. Beside the photograph sat his mother's old ceramic Christmas ornaments inside a wooden bowl. Ethan stared at them silently. Red painted glass. Tiny silver stars. Handmade angels. His mother used to hang them every December while old country music played through the house. After the funeral, Ethan had left them here untouched. Forgotten. But somebody had preserved them. Naomi noticed where he was looking. "I hope that was all right," she said softly. "Your mother made those herself, didn't she?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. His throat suddenly felt too tight. Finally, he nodded once. Titan slowly crossed the room. Ethan watched carefully. The dog normally inspected strangers for several minutes before relaxing around them, especially after deployment, especially inside enclosed spaces. But Titan walked directly toward Luke. The teenager froze. Titan sniffed his hand once, then quietly lowered himself beside the boy's chair. Luke looked stunned. "So, he likes me?" Ethan frowned slightly. Titan rarely trusted people that fast. "He usually doesn't," Ethan admitted. For the first time since Ethan arrived, a small smile touched Luke's face. The expression disappeared almost immediately, but Ethan caught it. Naomi moved carefully toward the stove. "There's coffee if you want some." Ethan almost said no automatically, then realized he couldn't remember the last hot meal he'd had inside an actual home. "Yeah," he muttered quietly. "Thanks." Naomi poured coffee into an old chipped mug while Luke crouched carefully beside Titan. The dog allowed it. That bothered Ethan more than it should have. Titan trusted instincts over emotion. Always. Which meant the dog saw something in the boy Ethan couldn't yet. Outside, the storm battered the ranch harder now. Wind screamed against the windows while snow hammered the roof overhead. Naomi handed Ethan the coffee. Their fingers brushed briefly. Cold. Too cold. This house wasn't staying warm enough. Ethan glanced toward the firewood stack near the stove. Small. Running low. His military instincts immediately started calculating survival time. Naomi sat slowly across from him. "We heard what happened after the flood," she said carefully. "About your parents." Ethan stared into the coffee. "I wasn't here." Silence settled heavily across the room. The words sounded colder, spoken aloud. Luke looked toward him carefully. "You were overseas?" Ethan nodded once. "Most of the time." Naomi lowered her eyes. "That must have been hard." Ethan almost laughed at that. Hard. There weren't enough words for what came after war. Or guilt. Titan suddenly lifted his head sharply. Every muscle tightened again. The dog stared toward the back window facing the barn. Low growl. Instantly, Ethan's body reacted. Years of combat erased exhaustion like a switch flipping inside him. He stood immediately. "What is it?" Titan moved toward the kitchen door now, focused, alert. Luke's expression changed nervously. "He does that every night," the boy whispered. Ethan looked at him. "What do you mean every night?" Luke hesitated, then glanced toward Naomi. The older woman looked uncomfortable suddenly. Finally, Luke answered quietly. "Sometimes somebody walks near the barn after dark." The room went silent except for the storm outside. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Who?" Luke shook his head. "I never saw clearly." His voice dropped lower. "But they only come during storms." Titan growled again, this time deeper. Naomi stood carefully from the table. "That's enough for tonight." But Ethan was already moving toward the back window. Snow blasted across the yard outside beneath darkness. The barn stood crooked beneath the storm lantern near the eastern pasture. At first he saw nothing. Then, movement. Quick. Near the far side of the barn. Gone instantly behind blowing snow. Ethan's heartbeat slowed into something colder, focused. The same feeling before operations overseas. Titan barked sharply now, one loud warning bark that rattled the windows. Luke flinched. Naomi's face turned pale. And somewhere outside in the darkness beyond the barn, something moved again. Ethan's body tightened instantly. The years disappeared in a heartbeat. Storm, darkness, unknown movement. His breathing slowed automatically, while every instinct sharpened at once. Titan barked again, louder this time. The German shepherd lunged toward the kitchen door so hard his claws scraped across the old floorboards. "Titan!" Ethan snapped. The dog ignored him completely. Luke stood up fast from the chair, eyes wide now. "I told you," he whispered. "Somebody's out there." Naomi looked pale beneath the stove light. "You should stay inside," she said quietly. But Ethan was already reaching for the flashlight clipped beside his duffel bag near the doorway. He checked the beam once, bright enough. Then he looked at Titan. The dog stood rigid beside the door, ears forward, low growl vibrating deep in his chest. Not panic. Tracking. Ethan recognized the posture immediately. Titan had found something. "Open the door," Ethan said. Naomi hesitated. "Ethan, please, lock it behind me." The older woman stared at him another second before reluctantly stepping aside. The moment Ethan opened the kitchen door, freezing wind exploded into the house. Snow swirled violently through the porch light, while Titan shot outside ahead of him like a shadow. "Titan!" The dog bounded across the ranch yard straight toward the barn. Ethan followed quickly, boots crunching through deep drifts while the flashlight beam cut across the storm. The barn lantern swung wildly in the wind ahead of them. Something slammed loosely against the side of the structure. Bang! 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 Ethan's pulse remained steady despite the cold slicing through his jacket. Military instincts settled over him like old armor. Scan the tree line. Check the fence. Watch for movement. Titan reached the barn doors first, then stopped. The dog lowered his body slightly and stared toward the rear corner of the building, growling. Ethan slowed carefully beside him. The old barn loomed above them, dark and enormous beneath the storm clouds. Snow collected heavily along the roof, while ancient wood groaned beneath the wind. The smell hit him first. Hay, cold iron, old livestock, and something else underneath it. Oil. Fresh motor oil. Ethan frowned slightly. Recent. Very recent. Titan suddenly moved again. Not toward the rear corner this time. Toward the sliding barn door itself. The dog pawed hard at the wood. Once, twice, then looked directly at Ethan. That look stopped him cold. Titan wasn't warning him away. He wanted inside. Ethan slowly slid the flashlight toward the snow near the entrance. Tracks, boot prints, fresh, half covered already by drifting snow. Somebody had been standing outside the barn within the last hour. Ethan crouched lower immediately. The prints faced the barn door, not the house. His eyes narrowed. Titan whined softly now, urgent. Ethan rose slowly and grabbed the frozen handle. The old barn door groaned loudly as he forced it open. Darkness swallowed the flashlight beam. Dust swirled through the cold air inside. Rows of empty horse stalls stretched into shadows while chains creaked softly overhead from the wind. Titan entered first. Slowly. Carefully. The dog moved through the barn aisle with terrifying focus, nose low to the ground. Ethan followed. Every sound inside the structure seemed amplified. The creak of wood. The howl of wind through cracks in the walls. Titan's breathing. Then, thump. Somewhere deeper inside the barn. Ethan froze instantly. Titan stopped too. The dog's ears lifted sharply. Another sound. Soft, almost hidden beneath the storm. Scratch. Scratch. Ethan swept the flashlight deeper into the shadows. Nothing. Empty stalls, broken tools, rusting farm equipment. Then Titan moved again, fast. The German shepherd rushed down the center aisle before stopping hard at the final horse stall near the eastern wall. The dog began scratching violently at the frozen floorboards. Wood splintered beneath his claws. Titan! The dog ignored him completely. Growling now. Deep. Aggressive. Ethan approached carefully. The stall looked abandoned like the rest of the barn. Rotting hay covered the corners while old harnesses hung from rusted nails nearby. But Titan kept scratching at the floor. One specific spot. Again. 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 Then Ethan heard it. A sound beneath the wood. Not loud, but unmistakable. A dull, hollow echo under the floorboards. Ethan slowly crouched beside the dog. The beam from his flashlight swept across the ground. The boards looked older here, different from the rest, recently moved. His stomach tightened slightly. What the hell? Suddenly, Titan snapped his head toward the rear wall. The dog barked violently. Ethan spun around. Movement. Fast. A shadow passed outside the small side window near the back of the barn, gone instantly into the storm. Ethan took off immediately. He sprinted through the barn aisle while Titan exploded ahead of him toward the rear exit. The side door slammed open beneath the wind. Snow blasted inside. Ethan rushed outside into darkness just in time to catch sight of a figure disappearing beyond the fence line. Human. Tall. Heavy coat. Running. Hey! The figure never looked back. Titan lunged forward instantly. No! Ethan grabbed the dog's collar hard before Titan disappeared into the blizzard. The German shepherd fought against him, barking furiously now toward the dark woods beyond the pasture. Then the figure vanished completely into the storm. Gone. Ethan stood breathing hard while snow swirled around them. Something about the movement bothered him. Too deliberate. Not some lost traveler. Not random. Whoever it was knew the ranch. Knew the storm would hide them. Titan continued growling toward the tree line, then suddenly stopped. The dog turned slowly back toward the barn, toward that same stall, the same spot beneath the floor. Ethan stared at the dog for a long moment. Titan never acted without reason. Never. Finally, Ethan led him back inside. The barn felt colder now, almost watchful. The flashlight beam drifted across the stall again, while Titan resumed pacing circles around the floorboards. Scratch, 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 Luke's voice suddenly echoed from the entrance. Did you see him? Ethan turned sharply. The boy stood near the main doors wrapped in Naomi's oversized coat, breathing hard from running through the storm. You shouldn't be out here, Ethan said. Luke ignored that completely. His eyes stayed fixed toward the rear window. Was it the same guy? Ethan frowned. You've seen him before? Luke hesitated, then nodded slowly. Since early December. Titan stopped pacing instantly. The dog looked directly at Luke. Luke swallowed nervously beneath that stare. Every few nights somebody comes near the barn, he admitted quietly. Sometimes I hear footsteps outside my room. His voice lowered further. One time I saw a flashlight moving in here after midnight. Naomi suddenly appeared near the barn entrance behind him. Luke. The warning in her voice was immediate. The teenager looked down, but Ethan noticed the fear on Naomi's face. Real fear. Not embarrassment, not guilt. Fear. Ethan stepped closer slowly. You knew somebody was coming onto the property? Naomi hesitated too long. Finally, she answered quietly. We tried not to ask questions. The storm roared against the barn walls. Titan walked back toward the stall again, then lowered himself directly over the strange section of floorboards. Watching. Guarding. As though he already understood something none of them did yet. Ethan stared at the dog, then slowly knelt beside the stall. His gloved hand brushed snow and dirt away from the edge of the boards. There, a tiny metal ring partially hidden beneath old hay, not visible unless someone knew where to look. Ethan's heartbeat slowed. Carefully, he hooked 2 fingers beneath the ring and pulled. The wooden panel shifted slightly upward, hidden, deliberate. Beneath it came the cold, hollow breath of darkness. Nobody spoke. The storm battered the barn roof overhead, while Ethan held the hidden wooden panel partially open, staring down into blackness thick enough to swallow the flashlight beam. Titan stood immediately beside him now, completely silent. The dog's growling had stopped. That alone unnerved Ethan more than the sounds outside. Titan only went silent when he was certain. Luke moved closer carefully, eyes wide. What is that? Ethan swept the flashlight downward again. Wooden steps, old, hand-built, leading beneath the barn. A cellar, he muttered. Naomi suddenly looked unsteady behind them. No, she whispered softly. Ethan turned toward her. You knew about this? She shook her head immediately. I swear I didn't. But something in her expression said otherwise. Not guilt. Recognition. Like the sight of the hidden trapdoor had awakened an old memory she wished stayed buried. The wind screamed through cracks in the barn walls while snow drifted across the floorboards around them. Titan slowly stepped toward the opening, then stopped again, waiting. Ethan understood instantly. The dog wanted permission, same as every tunnel search overseas, every hidden room, every dangerous place they entered together. Ethan reached down and rested one hand briefly against Titan's neck. Easy. The German shepherd descended first, slowly, silently. Ethan followed close behind with the flashlight, while Luke remained near the top of the stairs. Naomi didn't move at all. The deeper Ethan climbed beneath the barn, the colder the air became. Not natural cold. Stillness. Dust. Forgotten years sealed underground. The beam from his flashlight finally reached the bottom. A small underground room emerged from darkness. Concrete walls, metal shelves, old emergency lanterns, a rusted generator in one corner beneath a tarp. Storm cellar, built decades ago. Titan moved carefully through the room, nose low, inspecting every inch. The dog stopped near a stack of old wooden crates against the far wall, then sat down, alert, watching. Ethan swept the flashlight around slowly. The place had been abandoned for years, but not untouched. Somebody had been here recently. Dust patterns were disturbed near the shelves. Boot prints marked the concrete floor. Fresh. Luke's voice drifted down from above. "What do you see?" Ethan didn't answer immediately, because something on the shelf near the back wall had frozen him completely. A tape recorder, old cassette player, and beside it, his father's handwriting. Even after 7 years, Ethan recognized it instantly. Sharp block letters written with black marker across faded cardboard boxes. Water tests. Survey maps. Red water. Ethan's chest tightened painfully. Titan nudged one of the boxes as gently with his nose. Ethan knelt beside it slowly. Dust coated his gloves as he opened the lid. Inside sat stacks of folders wrapped carefully in plastic. Documents, photographs, maps, mining reports. The flashlight trembled slightly in Ethan's hand now. Not from fear. Memory. His father used to keep records like this for everything around the ranch. Weather patterns, river levels, grazing rotations, but this looked different. Obsessive. Secretive. Luke carefully climbed down the stairs at last. The teenager stared around the underground room in amazement. "Holy hell!" Ethan ignored the comment. He pulled one folder free and opened it carefully. Inside were county land maps stretching across Bitter Creek Valley. Large sections had been marked in red ink. Property boundaries, river access points, old mining zones. Then Ethan saw the company logo stamped across several pages. Red Water Minerals. His jaw tightened immediately. The name stirred something unpleasant in the back of his memory. Oil. Mining. Land acquisitions. He remembered arguments at the dinner table years ago. His father complaining about outsiders buying ranch land throughout the valley. At the time, Ethan barely listened. He'd been too busy trying to leave Montana behind. Luke crouched beside him carefully. "What is Redwater?" Ethan kept flipping pages. "Mining company. Still around?" "Oh yeah." Then his flashlight landed on another document. A photograph paper-clipped to handwritten notes. Ethan froze. The picture showed the northern river crossing outside Bitter Creek. Flood damage. Destroyed fencing. Emergency crews. The exact flood that killed his parents. His stomach turned cold. Beneath the photo, his father had written one sentence. They knew the dam would fail. Silence filled the cellar. Luke slowly looked up at him. "What does that mean?" Ethan's pulse thudded harder now. He flipped through more pages rapidly. Engineering reports, chemical runoff warnings, structural failure predictions. Every document carried dates from months before the flood. His father had been gathering evidence against someone. Titan suddenly stood and walked toward the rear wall. The dog pawed lightly at another stack of crates. Ethan followed. Inside sat several old cassette tapes wrapped in waterproof cloth, each labeled carefully. December, January, February. Then one final tape. For Ethan. The sight nearly knocked the breath out of him. His father's handwriting stared back at him from the faded label. For several long seconds, Ethan couldn't move. Luke noticed immediately. "You okay?" "No, not even close." Ethan stared at the tape while old grief rose inside him like floodwater breaking through cracked concrete. 7 years. 7 years running from this place. 7 years pretending none of it mattered anymore. And somehow his father had still left something waiting here for him. Titan moved beside Ethan and pressed gently against his shoulder, grounding him, always grounding him. Ethan swallowed hard and looked away. The beam from his flashlight drifted toward the far corner of the cellar. More supplies. Canned food. Emergency water drums. Then, another set of footprints. Fresh. Crossing the floor recently. Ethan's entire expression changed instantly. Military focus snapped back into place. He crouched lower near the prints. Large boots, heavy tread, still sharp in the dust. Recent. Very recent. Someone had entered this cellar after years of abandonment. Luke saw them too. That's not ours. No, Ethan said quietly. It's not. Titan growled softly now. The dog followed the tracks toward the back shelves where several folders had been disturbed. One box sat partially open. Empty. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Something had been taken. Naomi finally descended the stairs, slowly behind them. The older woman looked pale beneath the flashlight beam. The moment she saw the Redwater documents, something inside her face changed. Fear. Real fear. Her hand rose slowly to her mouth. Oh God. Ethan stood immediately. You know this company. Naomi didn't answer at first. Her eyes remained fixed on the photographs scattered across the table. Finally, she whispered, They told everyone the flood was natural. Luke turned toward her sharply. Told who? Naomi looked sick now, years older than she had upstairs. When I worked at St. Helena Medical, she said quietly, we treated several Redwater executives after the flood. Her voice trembled slightly. I overheard conversations. Ethan stared at her. What conversations? Naomi swallowed hard. About the valley. Her eyes slowly met his. About people refusing to sell their land. The storm rumbled overhead. Titan's growl deepened slightly. Ethan stepped closer. You think Redwater caused the flood? Naomi hesitated, then nodded once. I think your father believed they did. The cellar suddenly felt much smaller, much colder. Luke looked stunned. That's crazy. No, Ethan said quietly. He stared again at the engineering reports in his father's handwriting. Warning after warning after warning. Ignored. Buried. His father had known something. Maybe enough to get himself killed. Titan suddenly barked sharply. Everyone jumped. The dog stared directly upward toward the ceiling, toward the barn above them. Ethan heard it half a second later. Footsteps. Heavy. Crossing the barn floor overhead. All four of them froze instantly. Another step. Then another. Somebody was inside the barn. Again, the footsteps creaked slowly across the floorboards overhead. Heavy. Measured. Not hiding anymore. Titan exploded into barking so suddenly the sound echoed violently through the underground cellar. Luke flinched backward. Naomi grabbed the stair railing tightly. Ethan's entire posture changed. Cold. Focused. The same expression he carried during operations overseas, when everything dangerous became simple. Protect the people. Control the situation. Eliminate surprises. He switched off the flashlight instantly. Darkness swallowed the cellar. Only the storm remained above them. And those footsteps. Titan stood rigid at the base of the stairs, staring upward. Ethan leaned closer to Naomi and Luke. Stay down here, he whispered. Luke shook his head immediately. No way. Luke. I'm not staying down here alone. Another step overhead, closer now. Ethan listened carefully. One person, maybe 200 pounds, boots, no attempt to hide noise. That bothered him. Confident people made dangerous mistakes less often. Titan growled low again. Ethan rested one hand briefly on the dog's back. Quiet. The German shepherd fell silent instantly. Ethan slowly climbed the stairs. Every board creaked softly beneath his boots while cold air drifted downward from the barn above. At the top step he paused. Listened. Nothing. Not even movement now. The silence felt worse somehow. Carefully, Ethan pushed the hidden trapdoor open 1 inch. Dark barn shadows stretched across the aisle. Snow drifted through cracks in the walls beneath the swinging lantern. No movement. But the side door near the eastern wall stood open. Wind howled through it. Ethan climbed out slowly. Titan followed immediately beside him. The dog moved like smoke through the darkness, nose low, ears forward, tracking. Ethan crossed the barn aisle carefully toward the open side door. The snow outside whipped sideways beneath the storm. Fresh boot prints crossed the drift. Large, deep. Heading toward the ranch house this time. Ethan's stomach tightened. Naomi and Luke. He moved fast. Titan surged ahead beside him through the snow while Ethan sprinted across the yard toward the glowing farmhouse windows. The porch light swung violently overhead. The front door stood partially open. Ethan hit the porch hard enough to rattle the wood beneath his boots. "Naomi?" No answer. Titan rushed inside first. The house looked empty. Kitchen light glowing. Coffee still steaming faintly on the table. Chair overturned near the stove. Ethan's pulse slammed harder now. "Luke!" Footsteps upstairs. Fast. Titan barked sharply and bolted toward the staircase. Ethan followed instantly. At the top of the stairs, he found Luke standing frozen outside Naomi's bedroom, holding an old shotgun awkwardly in shaking hands. The teenager looked terrified. "She's gone." Ethan grabbed the shotgun immediately before Luke accidentally hurt himself. "What happened?" Luke pointed toward the rear hallway window. "I heard something outside and she went to look." Titan growled deep in his chest now. The dog stared toward the back of the house. Ethan moved carefully down the hallway. Cold air drifted through the cracked rear door near the mudroom. Snow blew inside across the floor. His jaw tightened. Someone had opened it. Titan pushed past him and bounded outside. Ethan followed into darkness again. The rear yard stretched toward the frozen creek behind the ranch. Snowfall reduced visibility to almost nothing. Then Titan barked once near the equipment shed. Ethan reached them seconds later. Naomi sat slumped against the shed wall wrapped in snow, breathing hard. Alive. Thank God. Ethan crouched beside her immediately. "Naomi." She looked shaken but conscious. "I'm all right," she whispered weakly. "I slipped." But Ethan immediately noticed the truth. Fresh boot prints surrounded her in the snow. Not hers. Someone had been standing here, watching. Naomi saw him looking. Fear flickered across her face. Then headlights appeared suddenly through the storm beyond the front gate. Bright. Approaching slowly. Ethan stood immediately. Titan moved in front of Naomi protectively, growling toward the road. A black SUV rolled through the drifting snow and stopped near the porch. Engine humming softly. Expensive vehicle. Out of place in Bitter Creek. The driver stepped out calmly beneath the falling snow. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark wool coat untouched by ranch work or weather. The man closed the SUV door carefully before looking toward Ethan. No fear, no surprise. Just confidence, the kind Ethan hated instantly. "Well," the man called through the storm, "looks like the rumors were true after all." Ethan didn't answer. The stranger approached slowly through the snow with his hands visible. Professional smile. Controlled posture. Titan's growl deepened immediately. The man noticed the dog first. That must be Titan. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. How do you know his name? The man smiled faintly. Small Valley. He extended one gloved hand casually. Damien Crow. Ethan ignored it. Damien lowered his hand smoothly without embarrassment. I work land acquisitions for Redwater Minerals. There it was. The name instantly changed the air between them. Titan stepped forward another inch. Damien glanced down briefly at the dog. Beautiful animal, he said calmly, though he seems a little suspicious of me. He's usually right. For the first time, Damien's smile weakened slightly. Luke appeared cautiously on the porch behind Ethan. The teenager looked frightened now. Damien noticed him too. You must be Luke. Titan barked sharply. The sound echoed across the ranch. Damien stopped walking immediately. Interesting. The man hid it well, but Ethan saw the tension in his shoulders now. Titan saw it too. The German shepherd moved directly between Damien and the house. Rigid, protective. Damien studied the dog carefully. Military trained? SEAL Support K9. That explains the attitude. Snow swirled harder around them. Naomi slowly stood behind Ethan, still pale from the cold. Damien's expression softened instantly when he noticed her. Mrs. Keller, he said smoothly, you should really be somewhere warmer at your age. Naomi's face tightened. We're fine. Damien ignored her answer. His eyes shifted back toward Ethan. You picked a rough time to come home. Ethan folded his arms. What do you want? Damien glanced slowly across the ranch, toward the barn, the house, the frozen fields. Honestly, he said quietly, I came to help. Titan growled again, longer this time. Damien smiled faintly toward the dog. He really doesn't like me. Ethan didn't blink. You still haven't answered my question. The corporate agent sighed softly. Bitter Creek Valley's changing, Mr. Mercer. Redwater plans major expansion projects through this region over the next few years. He nodded toward the ranch. This property sits directly inside future development zones. Luke stepped down from the porch now. You mean the mines? Damien looked amused. Resource operations. You poisoned the river, Luke snapped. Naomi grabbed his shoulder quickly. Luke? But Damien's calm expression barely changed. People say many things in small towns. Ethan watched him carefully. Everything about the man felt rehearsed, polite, professional, dangerous. The same kind of men Ethan dealt with overseas before villages disappeared overnight beneath politics and money. Damien reached slowly inside his coat. Titan instantly bared his teeth. Easy, Damien said calmly. Just paperwork. He removed a clean white envelope and held it out. Your ranch taxes are beyond recovery. His voice stayed smooth and measured. Redwater's prepared to make a generous offer before the county seizes the land entirely. Ethan didn't take the envelope. Snow gathered slowly across Damien's shoulders while silence stretched between them. Finally, Ethan asked quietly, How long have people been sneaking around my barn? That caught him, just slightly. But Ethan saw it. Tiny pause, tiny shift in the eyes. Damien recovered immediately. I'm afraid I don't know what you mean. Titan barked violently now. The sound made Luke jump. Damien's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Ethan stepped closer. You know exactly what I mean. The wind roared across Bitter Creek Ranch. For several seconds, neither man moved. Then Damien slowly lowered the envelope. Listen carefully, Mr. Mercer. His voice lost some warmth now. You've been gone 7 years. Whatever emotional attachment brought you back. He glanced toward the barn. This place isn't worth dying over. Naomi looked terrified suddenly. Luke stared at Damien openly now, but Ethan remained perfectly still. That frightened Damien more than anger would have. Finally, Ethan spoke. I was planning to sell. The corporate agent relaxed slightly. Then Ethan continued. Now I'm not. Silence. Titan stood beside him like a shadow carved from muscle and teeth. Damien's expression hardened for the first time since arriving. Not openly. Just enough. That would be unfortunate. Ethan took one step closer through the snow. You should leave. The two men stared at each other beneath the storm. Finally, Damien nodded once. Think carefully before digging through old family history, Mr. Mercer. His eyes drifted toward the barn one final time. Some things buried a long time ago should probably stay buried. Then he turned calmly and walked back toward the SUV. Titan growled until the vehicle disappeared beyond the gate into darkness. Only then did the dog finally relax slightly. Luke looked shaken. What the hell was that? Ethan kept staring toward the empty road. The snow continued falling over Bitter Creek Valley, while Damien's warning echoed quietly inside his head. Some things buried a long time ago should probably stay buried. But Ethan already knew one thing for certain now. Titan hadn't been guarding that barn from ghosts. He'd been guarding it from people. The realization stayed with Ethan long after Damien Crow's SUV disappeared into the storm. Snow continued drifting across Bitter Creek Ranch beneath the black Montana sky, while silence settled heavily over the valley again. But it no longer felt like peaceful silence. It felt watched. Titan stood near the front gate for several minutes after Damien left, ears raised toward the road, body tense beneath the falling snow. Only when the taillights vanished completely beyond the ridge did the German Shepherd finally return to the porch. Luke wrapped his arms tightly around himself against the cold. That guy gives me the creeps. Naomi looked exhausted now. We should get inside. Ethan remained facing the road another moment. Something about Damien's warning bothered him. Not the threat itself, the certainty behind it. Men like Damien Crow only acted that calm when they believed the situation was already under control, which meant Redwater knew something valuable still existed somewhere on this ranch, something worth sending people into blizzards for. Titan nudged Ethan's hand lightly. The movement pulled him back to the present. Inside the farmhouse, Naomi added more wood to the stove while Luke sat at the kitchen table staring toward the windows every few seconds. The storm worsened steadily throughout the night. Wind rattled the glass hard enough to shake the old frames while snow buried the porch railings deeper by the hour. Ethan spread the maps and documents from the cellar across the kitchen table beneath a hanging lamp. Titan lay nearby, though the dog remained awake, always listening. Ethan studied the engineering reports again carefully. Most of them were dated 8 months before the Bitter Creek flood. One page carried a handwritten note from his father. The retention wall won't hold through spring runoff. Another, Redwater refuses to shut down operations. His jaw tightened. Luke leaned closer beside him. So they knew the flood was coming? Ethan nodded slowly. Looks that way. Then why didn't anybody stop them? Nobody answered. Because all 4 people in the room already knew the truth. Money, influence, fear. Naomi quietly placed a cup of coffee beside Ethan. Her hands trembled slightly. I should have said something sooner, she whispered. Ethan looked up. What exactly did you hear? Naomi lowered herself carefully into the chair across from him. When I worked at St. Helena Medical Center, Redwater executives used to come through during inspections and drilling operations. Her eyes stayed fixed on the table. After the flood, one of them was admitted overnight for chest pains. Luke looked toward her. You never told me that. I didn't want you carrying it around. The older woman rubbed her tired hands together slowly. I overheard two men arguing outside his room. Her voice softened further. One of them kept saying your father should have stayed quiet. Ethan's chest tightened instantly. And the other? Naomi hesitated. He said the valley problem would be solved once the flood cleared the land. Silence. Only the storm remained. Luke looked sick. You think they killed all those people? Naomi's eyes filled with sorrow. I think they let it happen. Titan suddenly lifted his head sharply. The dog stood. Ethan noticed immediately. What is it? Titan moved toward the front window overlooking the eastern pasture. Growling. Low. Warning. Ethan rose instantly and crossed the room. At first he saw only darkness and snow. Then, light. Faint movement near the barn. His pulse slowed. Headlamp. Somebody was out there again. Stay inside, he said quietly. Luke stood immediately. I'm coming with you. No. But... Luke. The teenager fell silent beneath Ethan's tone. Titan barked once sharply. The light outside vanished instantly. Ethan grabbed his coat and flashlight. This time he also reached beneath the kitchen sink where Naomi kept an old hunting rifle wrapped in cloth. She noticed. So much for peaceful nights, she whispered sadly. Ethan checked the chamber quickly. Loaded. Then he looked toward Luke. Lock the doors behind me. The storm hit like a wall the second he stepped outside. Snow whipped violently across the ranch yard, while Titan bounded ahead toward the barn. The dog moved faster now, aggressive, protective. Ethan followed through knee-deep drifts, flashlight beam bouncing wildly through the blizzard. The barn lantern swung violently again in the wind, but this time another smell drifted through the storm. Sharp, chemical, gasoline. Ethan stopped dead. Titan barked furiously. Move! They sprinted toward the barn. Then orange light exploded suddenly along the eastern wall. Flames. Fire erupted upward so fast it looked like the night itself had ignited. Damn it! The blaze spread instantly across dry timber coated in fuel. Inside the barn, horses screamed in panic. The sound ripped through the storm. Titan lunged forward before Ethan could stop him. The German shepherd vanished through smoke pouring from the open barn doors. Titan! Ethan charged after him. Heat slammed into him immediately. The inside of the barn had become chaos. Terrified horses kicked violently against their stalls while flames crawled across support beams overhead. Smoke thickened fast beneath the rafters. Titan barked sharply somewhere deeper inside. Ethan forced open the first stall gate. Easy! Easy! A panicked mare burst past him into the snow outside. Another horse slammed wildly against wood nearby. The fire spread faster every second. Gasoline. Deliberate. Somebody wanted the entire structure gone. Titan appeared through the smoke beside the rear stalls, barking furiously toward one trapped horse tangled in collapsed fencing. Ethan pushed through the heat toward them. A burning beam crashed nearby hard enough to shower sparks across the floor. Titan grabbed the horse's sleeve strap gently between his teeth and pulled backward while Ethan cut the tangled rope loose with a utility knife from his pocket. The horse bolted outside. More smoke rolled downward. Too much. The roof wouldn't hold long. Then Ethan heard Naomi scream from outside. Luke! Fear sliced through him instantly. He turned toward the barn entrance. Luke stood near the side wall trying desperately to drag water hoses through deep snow toward the flames. Then Ethan saw it. A dark figure moving beyond the eastern fence line. Masked, running, the same heavy build from earlier. The man glanced once toward the burning barn before disappearing into the storm. Titan saw him too. The dog exploded toward the open doorway. No! Ethan grabbed Titan's harness just before the dog vanished into darkness after the fleeing figure. The German shepherd fought hard against him, furious, protective. But another crash thundered overhead. The barn roof groaned violently. Time was gone. Out! Ethan dragged Titan toward the entrance while flames consumed rafters behind them. The second they burst into the snow outside, half the eastern loft collapsed inward with a roar of sparks and burning timber. Luke stumbled backward from the heat. Naomi suddenly clutched her chest hard beside the porch, her face drained pale. "Naomi!" She collapsed to her knees in the snow. Ethan reached her immediately, while Titan circled protectively nearby, barking toward the woods. Naomi struggled for breath. Sharp, shallow. Pain twisted across her face. "My pills," she whispered weakly. "Inside," Luke looked terrified. "The kitchen cabinet!" Ethan grabbed the teenager's shoulders hard. "Stay with her." Then he ran. The farmhouse door slammed open beneath the wind as Ethan rushed inside through smoke drifting from the barn fire outside. His heart pounded violently now, not from the flames, from memory. Fire. Screaming. Smoke. Another village overseas burning beneath helicopter blades overhead. Ethan slammed the cabinet open hard enough to rattle dishes. Medicine bottles scattered. "Find the pills. Find the pills." Titan barked outside again. Urgent. Ethan grabbed the medication and sprinted back into the storm. Naomi sat trembling against Luke while flames reflected across the snow behind them, like sunrise from hell. She swallowed the pills shakily. Slowly, her breathing eased. Not fully, but enough. Luke looked near tears. Titan returned from the edge of the property, growling toward the dark woods again. The masked figure was gone. Only the storm remained. And the fire. Neighbors finally began arriving 20 minutes later after spotting smoke through the valley. Pickup trucks, flashlights, men dragging water tanks through the snow. Together they managed to contain the blaze before it reached the farmhouse. But by midnight, half the barn had burned black against the storm sky. Ethan stood near the wreckage, breathing hard, while melted snow dripped from his jacket. Titan remained beside him silently. The German shepherd's fur smelled heavily of smoke. Luke approached slowly. "There's something else." Ethan looked toward him. Luke pointed toward the security camera mounted near the equipment shed. "I forgot those still worked." Ethan's eyes narrowed. The old ranch cameras. His father installed them years ago after livestock thefts in the valley. Maybe. Just maybe. An hour later, they gathered around the ancient monitor inside the farmhouse kitchen. Static rolled across the screen. Then grainy footage appeared. Snow. Darkness. The eastern fence line. And finally, a pickup truck. Clear enough to identify. One man stepping out carrying a fuel can. Luke covered his mouth. Naomi stared silently. Titan growled softly at the screen. Then the truck shifted slightly beneath the camera angle, and the company logo on the door became visible through the snow. Redwater Minerals. Nobody in the kitchen spoke. The grainy footage continued rolling across the monitor, while flames reflected faintly through the farmhouse windows behind them. Snowstorm static distorted the image, but the logo remained unmistakable. Luke slowly leaned backward in his chair. "Oh my God." Naomi covered her mouth with one trembling hand. Titan sat directly beside Ethan now, staring at the screen with rigid focus as if the dog understood exactly what the symbol meant. Maybe he did. Animals remembered danger differently than people. Ethan rewound the footage again. The truck appeared, stopped near the barn. One man stepped out carrying gasoline. Then the image flickered briefly as the figure moved toward the eastern wall. Deliberate. Professional. No hesitation. Ethan paused the frame carefully. A partial license plate reflected beneath the snow-covered taillight. Not enough for certainty. Enough for suspicion. Luke looked toward Ethan. What do we do now? The question lingered heavily in the room. For years, Ethan survived by keeping moving, never staying long enough anywhere for trouble to catch him, never building anything, never belonging anywhere again. But now trouble had followed him home anyway. Titan slowly rested his head against Ethan's knee beneath the table, grounding him again. Always grounding him. Naomi finally broke the silence. You should take that footage to the sheriff. Ethan kept staring at the frozen image on the monitor. Maybe. Luke frowned. What do you mean, maybe? They tried to burn us alive. Naomi's expression darkened slightly. The county's been tied to Redwater for years. Her voice lowered. Most folks around Bitter Creek stopped trusting officials a long time ago. Ethan shut off the monitor. The kitchen suddenly felt quieter, smaller. Outside, smoke continued rising from the blackened skeleton of the barn, while snow buried the ruined timbers beneath fresh white drifts. Titan lifted his head sharply. Ethan noticed immediately. The dog stared toward the dark window over the sink. Listening. Always listening. Ethan exhaled slowly. Nobody's coming back tonight. Titan relaxed only slightly. That told Ethan enough. The dog believed danger still remained nearby. Hours later, the storm finally weakened. The valley settled into cold silence beneath a moon hidden somewhere beyond the clouds. Luke fell asleep on the couch, wrapped in blankets beside the stove, while Naomi rested upstairs, after the chest pain eased. Ethan remained awake alone at the kitchen table. Titan lay nearby. The burned scent from the fire still clung to the dog's fur. Ethan stared down at the cassette tape labeled "For Ethan." His father's handwriting looked strange beneath the kitchen light. Too alive. Too immediate. 7 years gone, and somehow one small piece of ink still carried enough weight to crack open memories he spent years trying to bury. His hand hovered over the tape recorder, then stopped. Not yet. He wasn't ready. Outside the window, the ruined barn stood black against the snow. Titan suddenly lifted his head again. Ethan glanced toward him. What? The dog stood slowly and walked toward the back door. Not alarmed this time. Restless. Ethan followed him outside. The cold hit hard but cleaner now after the storm passed. Moonlight broke faintly through moving clouds, silvering the frozen fields and mountains surrounding Bitter Creek Valley. Titan moved quietly through the snow toward the damaged barn. Ethan followed. The fire crews from neighboring ranches had left hours earlier. Only charred beams and drifting smoke remained now. The eastern side of the barn had partially collapsed inward. Titan stopped near the ruined stall where they discovered the cellar entrance, then sat down, watching Ethan. The meaning was obvious. Go look. Ethan climbed carefully through the burned debris and lowered himself back into the hidden cellar. The underground room remained untouched. Safe. For now. He sat heavily at the old table beneath the weak emergency lantern and finally inserted the cassette tape into the recorder. Static crackled softly. Then, his father's voice. Rough. Older. Tired. Ethan froze instantly. Testing. All right. If this thing still works. A soft cough followed. Guess that means somebody finally found the cellar. Ethan lowered his eyes immediately. The sound of his father's voice hit harder than any explosion ever had. So, if you're hearing this, Ethan, another pause, then I suppose you finally came home. Silence filled the cellar except for the faint spinning of the tape. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. God, I don't know how much time I've got left before Redwater realizes what I know. His father sounded exhausted. They've been pushing people off this valley for years. Threats, bribes, pressure. Some folks gave up, others disappeared. Ethan's pulse slowed, focused now, listening. The flood wasn't natural, his father continued quietly. The retention dam north of Bitter Creek was already unstable. Redwater engineers knew that months before spring runoff. Papers shuffled faintly on the recording. I copied everything I could. Titan climbed quietly down the cellar stairs and settled beside Ethan. The tape continued. If anything happens to me, the evidence stays here. Another long pause. Because nobody in this county is going to protect this ranch once I'm gone. Ethan stared at the floor. Guilt worked slowly through him like poison. His father knew danger was coming, and Ethan hadn't been here. Overseas, always overseas. Another pause crackled through the tape. Then his father's voice softened slightly. You were always good at running toward dangerous things, son. A faint, tired laugh. Guess that comes from your mother's stubborn side. Ethan swallowed hard. You probably still blame yourself for things you couldn't control. His father sighed quietly. Mercer men are good at that too. The words struck deeper than Ethan expected, because they were true, too true. The failed extraction mission overseas replayed instantly behind his eyes. Dust, gunfire, civilians trapped inside collapsing buildings, a child screaming, the sound of helicopters overhead. Ethan's breathing changed suddenly. Titan noticed instantly. The German shepherd rose and pressed firmly against Ethan's chest. Grounding pressure. Trained response. Ethan clenched both hands against the table hard enough for his knuckles to ache. Not now. But memory didn't care. Smoke from the burned barn mixed with old combat smells inside his head until Montana disappeared completely. He wasn't in Bitter Creek anymore. He was back overseas, carrying bodies through fire while radio chatter screamed through his headset. Ethan sucked in a sharp breath. Titan pressed harder against him. The dog whined softly. Focus here. Here. Not there. Ethan shut his eyes tight. Count breathing. 1, 2, 3. Slowly the cellar returned around him. Cold concrete. Lantern light. Snowstorm outside. Titan. Always Titan. The dog rested his head heavily across Ethan's knee now without moving. Waiting. Protecting. Ethan rubbed one rough hand across the German shepherd's neck shakily. Good boy. His voice barely came out. Upstairs in the barn, footsteps creaked softly. Ethan's entire body tensed again before realizing, Luke. The teenager climbed carefully into the cellar, carrying a lantern. He stopped halfway down the stairs when he saw Ethan sitting there. Titan remained pressed against him protectively. Luke looked uncertain. You okay? Ethan wiped quickly at his face before answering. Yeah. Luke didn't believe him, but he sat quietly across the table anyway. For a while, neither of them spoke. The tape recorder hissed softly in the silence. Finally, Luke glanced toward Titan. He always does that? When? When you get like this? Ethan looked down at the dog. Yeah. Luke nodded slowly. My dad used to wake up screaming sometimes after the mine collapse. His voice lowered carefully. Grandma said people come home carrying things they never talk about. Ethan stared at the lantern light flickering against the cellar walls. Veterans don't say much because most people don't really want the truth. They want cleaned-up versions. Hero stories. Flags. Not panic attacks in the middle of the night because your brain still thinks people are dying. Luke studied him quietly, then asked the question nobody usually did. What happened over there? Ethan's jaw tightened immediately. The easy answer would have been nothing. Fine. Doesn't matter. But something about the boy's voice stopped him. No judgment, no curiosity, just honesty. Finally, Ethan answered softly. We were pulling civilians out of a compound after an ambush. He stared toward the old cassette player. The building collapsed before we got everyone out. Luke remained silent. Ethan swallowed hard. I made the wrong call. No, Luke said quietly. Ethan looked up sharply. The teenager met his eyes steadily. You came back anyway. Luke shrugged slightly. Most people never do. The words landed harder than the tape recorder. For several seconds, Ethan couldn't answer. Titan finally relaxed beneath his hand. Outside, wind drifted softly through the burned remains of the barn above them. And for the first time since returning to Bitter Creek Ranch, Ethan Mercer no longer felt completely alone. Morning came slowly to Bitter Creek Valley. The storm clouds finally broke apart just after sunrise, revealing endless snow-covered mountains glowing pale blue beneath the weak winter light. Smoke drifted lazily from the farmhouse chimney, while the burned remains of the barn stood black against the frozen fields like a wound carved into the ranch itself. Ethan stepped onto the porch carrying a steaming mug of coffee. The cold air bit sharply at his lungs. Titan followed beside him immediately. The German Shepherd moved slower this morning after inhaling smoke during the fire, but his posture remained alert. Every few seconds, the dog scanned the tree line beyond the eastern fence. Still working. Still protecting. Ethan stared toward the ruined barn in silence. The previous night replayed endlessly in his mind. The fire. Damien Crowe. His father's voice on the tape. And Luke's words. You came back anyway. Strange how one sentence from a kid could hit harder than years of military counseling. The porch door creaked behind him. Naomi stepped outside, wrapped tightly in a thick wool blanket. You should rest, Ethan said quietly. She gave a tired smile. So should you. Neither of them moved. The older woman looked toward the burned barn. They wanted those records badly. Ethan nodded once. Yeah. Naomi lowered her eyes. You really think your father was murdered? The question lingered heavily between them. Ethan stared across the valley. When I was overseas, he said slowly, I learned something about dangerous men. His breath drifted white through the cold air. If they're willing to threaten people, they're usually willing to do worse. Naomi looked sick hearing it spoken aloud. Titan suddenly lifted his head sharply toward the road. Engine noise. Distant. Approaching. Ethan noticed instantly. The dog's ears rose higher. Not aggressive, alert. A county sheriff truck appeared through drifting snow minutes later, climbing the narrow road toward the ranch. Luke stepped onto the porch behind them. That's new. The truck stopped near the gate. A woman climbed out wearing a heavy sheriff's jacket over thermal gear. Mid-30s maybe. Lean build. Dark braided hair tucked beneath a winter cap. Calm eyes that scanned the ranch carefully before landing on the burned barn. Then on Ethan. She approached slowly through the snow. Titan remained beside Ethan, watching her closely. Unlike Damien Crowe, the woman didn't fake confidence. She moved like someone trained to notice danger before it happened. Military. Ethan recognized it instantly. The woman stopped several feet away. Ethan Mercer? Depends who's asking. That earned the faintest hint of a smile. Deputy Clara Boone. She held up a gloved hand briefly. County Sheriff's Office. Titan sniffed the air once, then relaxed slightly. Interesting. Clara noticed. Well, she said quietly, guess I passed inspection. Ethan folded his arms. What do you want? The deputy glanced toward the barn. Heard about the fire. Her eyes drifted toward Naomi and Luke. Wanted to make sure everybody survived it. Luke frowned slightly. That's all? Clara looked toward him carefully. Young man, if I wanted to arrest someone, I wouldn't drive up here alone. That answer told Ethan enough. Not corrupt, or at least not stupid. Naomi invited her inside out of the cold. Within minutes, Clara stood near the kitchen stove warming her hands while Ethan replayed the security footage on the monitor. The deputy watched silently. No interruptions, no forced reactions. When the Redwater truck appeared on screen, her expression hardened immediately. "Well," she muttered quietly, "that explains some things." Ethan looked toward her. "You know them. Everybody in this county knows Redwater." Clara crossed her arms slowly. "Question is whether anybody's willing to fight them." Titan walked over and sat beside her calmly. The deputy glanced down at the dog. "Former military? SEAL support." She nodded once. "Thought so." Something about the way she said it caught Ethan's attention. "You served?" "Army medic." Her tone stayed casual. "Afghanistan." Ethan studied her more carefully now. There it was. The posture. The eyes. Same exhaustion veterans carried after seeing too much, too young. Clara noticed him noticing. "Don't worry," she said quietly. "I left that sandbox years ago." Nobody really left it. Not completely. Luke sat forward at the table. "So what happens now?" Clara looked toward the security footage again. "Officially?" She sighed softly. "Not much. The truck logo alone isn't enough to charge Redwater directly." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Unofficially, this isn't the first suspicious fire connected to land disputes around Bitter Creek." Naomi looked stunned. "There were others?" "Barns, equipment sheds, water lines destroyed." Clara lowered her voice slightly. "People get scared. Then they sell." Ethan's jaw tightened. Titan growled softly beside him. The deputy noticed immediately. "That dog's smarter than half the department. He thinks before most people do." Clara's expression darkened slightly. "Probably why he's still alive." Silence settled briefly across the kitchen. Then Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and removed several documents from the cellar. Clara took them carefully. Her eyes scanned the engineering reports, then stopped. "What the hell?" She flipped pages faster now. Dam safety reports, toxic runoff data, Redwater inspection signatures. The deputy slowly looked up. These files should have triggered federal investigations years ago. "My father collected them before the flood." Clara stared toward the burned barn. "He hid all this under there?" "Looks that way." The deputy rubbed one hand across her face tiredly. "Jesus Christ." Titan suddenly stood again. The dog moved toward the back door. Ethan followed his gaze. Nothing outside now except drifting snow and silence. But Titan remained tense. Always tense now, like he understood something terrible still hovered around the ranch. Clara noticed too. "He always act like that?" "Only when something's wrong." The deputy looked back toward Ethan. "I want to show you something." An hour later, they drove into Bitter Creek town beneath weak winter sunlight. The sheriff's station sat beside an aging gas station and an abandoned feed store near the center of town. Old snow piled against sidewalks while pickup trucks lined the frozen street outside Annie's diner. People noticed Ethan immediately. Small towns always did, especially when accompanied by a massive German shepherd walking beside him like a shadow. Clara led him through the sheriff's station quietly toward the basement records room. Dust coated everything. Metal filing cabinets stretched along concrete walls beneath flickering fluorescent lights. "Nobody comes down here anymore," Clara said. Titan sniffed the air carefully as they moved deeper into the room. Clara opened one cabinet near the back wall. Flood investigation files spilled inside. Ethan immediately noticed missing folders. Large gaps. "What happened here?" Clara leaned against the cabinet heavily. "Former sheriff retired 3 years ago." Her voice lowered. "Before leaving, He shredded half the old Redwater complaints. Ethan stared at her. You sure? She pulled out several surviving witness statements. Burn marks scarred the edges. These were hidden inside another file box behind the furnace room. Clara handed him one carefully. Your father filed over 20 environmental complaints before the flood. Ethan scanned the page. Toxic leakage into the North River. Unsafe blasting near the retention wall. Emergency warnings ignored. His stomach turned colder with every sentence. Then Clara handed him a faded photograph. Ethan froze. The picture showed his father standing beside several ranchers near the retention dam weeks before the flood. One section of the concrete wall behind them had already cracked visibly. Written across the back in black ink, they knew. Titan growled low suddenly. Both humans looked toward him immediately. The dog stared toward the far corner of the records room. Focused. Clara frowned. What is it? Titan walked slowly toward an old filing cabinet partially hidden beneath stacked boxes. The German shepherd sniffed the bottom drawer hard, then barked once sharply. Ethan crouched beside the cabinet. Locked. Clara frowned. That drawer's been sealed for years. Titan barked again. Ethan looked toward her. You got a key? 10 minutes later, Clara forced the drawer open using an old maintenance tool from upstairs. Inside sat only one file, marked confidential. Clara slowly opened it, then went completely silent. Ethan took the folder carefully. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Dead livestock near poisoned water, collapsed mine tunnels, children hospitalized after chemical exposure. And finally, one final photograph. Ethan's hands tightened instantly. The image showed the destroyed river crossing the morning after the flood. His father's truck sat upside down in the water below. But something else caught Ethan's eye. The guardrail near the crash site, cleanly cut, not broken. Cut. Clara saw it too. Oh my God! Ethan's pulse slowed dangerously, cold, focused, predatory. His father hadn't lost control during the flood. Somebody sabotaged the truck. Titan pressed against Ethan's leg quietly, as if sensing the shift happening inside him. Then Clara turned another page, and the room fell silent again. Because taped beneath the photograph sat a typed internal memo from Redwater Minerals. Authorized flood response protocols approved, dated 3 days before the dam collapsed. The paper trembled slightly in Ethan's hands, not because he was afraid, because rage had a pulse, cold, controlled, dangerous. The basement records room suddenly felt too small to breathe in. Clara Boone stared at the memo in disbelief. This should have triggered a federal investigation immediately. Titan growled softly beside Ethan. The dog sensed the shift in him again. Years ago, during deployments overseas, Titan learned the difference between Ethan being tense and Ethan becoming dangerous. This was the second one. Ethan lowered the document carefully onto the metal table. Somebody buried all of this. Clara nodded grimly. Yeah. Her eyes drifted toward the shredded, empty file spaces in the cabinet. And somebody worked hard making sure it stayed buried. Luke looked pale now. So Redwater knew the flood was coming, and they protected themselves before warning the valley. Ethan finished quietly. The room fell silent. Only the old fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Titan suddenly stood and walked toward the stairwell leading upstairs. Alert again. Always alert now. Clara noticed too. That dog ever relax? Not anymore. The deputy looked at Ethan carefully. Neither do you. Their eyes met briefly. Veterans recognized certain things in each other without explanation. The sleeplessness, the distance, the constant readiness for disaster. Ethan looked away first. We need copies of everything. Clara nodded immediately, already thinking the same thing. An hour later, snow drifted lazily through downtown Bitter Creek, while Clara made photocopies in the sheriff's station office upstairs. Titan lay near the front entrance, watching every passing vehicle through the glass doors. Luke sat beside him drinking hot chocolate from Annie's diner across the street. The teenager looked overwhelmed, like the world had suddenly become much darker than he believed possible. Maybe it had. Ethan stood near the window overlooking Main Street. Old ranch trucks rolled slowly past snowbanks while people hurried between stores beneath heavy winter coats. Normal life. That was the strange thing about corruption. Most people kept living beside it without ever seeing the machinery underneath. Clara approached carrying a thick folder. "You should know something else." Ethan turned toward her. The deputy lowered her voice. "Damian Crow's been meeting privately with county commissioners for months." Luke frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means Redwater's buying influence." Clara handed Ethan the copies. "And if they realize you've got evidence tying them to the flood," she hesitated slightly, "things could escalate fast." Titan suddenly barked once sharply. All three humans looked toward the street instantly. A black SUV rolled slowly past the sheriff's station windows. Damian Crow. The man never looked toward the building directly, but Ethan knew he'd been seen. Titan's growl deepened. The SU-5 continued down Main Street before disappearing around the corner. Luke swallowed hard. "He knows we're here." Clara's expression darkened. "He probably knows everything." That feeling followed Ethan all the way back to Bitter Creek Ranch. The valley looked different now beneath fading afternoon light. Not peaceful anymore. Occupied. Like every road and tree line might hide someone watching. Titan sat rigid in the passenger seat the entire drive home. The dog scanned constantly. Fence lines, forests, snow-covered hills, tracking danger that hadn't appeared yet. When they finally reached the ranch, Ethan noticed something wrong immediately. The front gate hung partially open. He stopped the truck instantly. Titan barked hard. "Stay inside," Ethan ordered Luke. The dog was already out of the truck before the sentence finished. Ethan followed quickly through the snow, boots crunching toward the house. No smoke from the chimney. The porch light flickered strangely. His pulse slowed into combat rhythm automatically. Clear the perimeter. Check entrances. Watch windows. Titan circled toward the eastern side of the farmhouse, growling low. Ethan reached the porch. The front door stood slightly open. Cold air drifted through the gap. "Naomi?" No answer. His stomach tightened hard. He pushed inside fast. The kitchen looked untouched, but every cabinet stood open. Drawers dumped across the floor. Papers scattered everywhere. Someone had searched the house. Titan barked sharply from the hallway. Ethan rushed toward him. Naomi sat on the floor beside the living room couch, wrapped in blankets, breathing shakily but alive. Luke ran inside behind Ethan. "Grandma!" Naomi grabbed his hand tightly. "I'm all right." But Ethan immediately saw the fear in her eyes. Real fear. "What happened?" The older woman swallowed hard. "Two men came while you were gone." Her voice trembled slightly. "They said they worked for the county tax office." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Did they threaten you?" "No." Naomi looked toward the overturned cabinets. "They just kept asking about the barn." Titan paced circles near the shattered back window, growling softly. Luke stared around the destroyed room in disbelief. "They broke in?" Naomi nodded slowly. "One of them said you were making a mistake by staying here." The words settled heavily in the room. Ethan crossed toward the broken window carefully. Fresh boot prints marked the snow outside, leading toward the eastern pasture. Toward the barn. Titan moved beside him instantly, then suddenly stopped. The dog sniffed hard near the porch steps. Ethan followed his gaze downward. Something hung nailed to the wood beneath the railing. A dead raven. Frozen solid. Its black wings spread wide against the snow. Luke recoiled immediately. "What the hell?" Naomi covered her mouth, but Ethan only stared coldly at the bird. Message received. Fear tactic. Designed to intimidate. Classic psychological pressure. Except they'd chosen the wrong veteran for that game. Titan barked violently toward the tree line. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Inside," he told Luke and Naomi quietly. This time neither argued. As darkness settled across Bitter Creek Valley, Ethan transformed the ranch into something entirely different. Not a home, a defensive position. Motion alarms from old military gear appeared around the property line. Fishing wire bells stretched across blind fence approaches. Floodlights salvaged from the burned barn were mounted overlooking the eastern field. Luke watched him work in fascination. "You've done this before." Ethan hammered another support post into frozen ground. "Too many times." The teenager hesitated. "You think they're coming back tonight?" Ethan looked toward the mountains darkening beneath snowfall. "Yes." That answer silenced Luke completely. Later that evening, Naomi sat quietly at the kitchen table while Ethan cleaned soot from one of the old ranch rifles. Titan rested nearby but remained awake. Always awake now. The old woman finally spoke softly. "There's something I never told you." Ethan looked up immediately. Naomi stared into her untouched tea. "Years ago, before the flood," her hands trembled slightly, "I worked temporary medical contracts for Redwater executives during drilling operations." Luke frowned. "You never told me that." "I was ashamed." Ethan leaned back slowly. "What did you hear?" Naomi swallowed hard. "One night your father came to the clinic arguing with 2 Redwater supervisors." Her eyes filled with sorrow. "He kept saying people would die if they didn't shut the retention dam down." Ethan's grip tightened around the rifle cloth. "And them?" Naomi looked directly at him now. "They told him accidents happen in the mountains all the time." Silence. Outside, snow drifted softly through the darkness. Titan suddenly lifted his head sharply. The dog stood, growling. Then every light inside the farmhouse went black at once. Power cut. Luke inhaled sharply. "What happened?" Ethan was already moving. "Stay down." The ranch vanished into darkness, except for moonlight, reflecting across snow outside. Titan barked violently toward the eastern field. Then came the sound, metal clanging somewhere near the water pump. Ethan grabbed a flashlight and rushed onto the porch. The beam cut across drifting snow, toward the pump house, toward fresh movement disappearing behind it. He sprinted through the darkness while Titan raced ahead. By the time Ethan reached the pump system, icy water sprayed violently into the air. The main line had been smashed apart, sabotaged. Titan barked furiously toward the woods, but whoever damaged the line was already gone. Ethan stood breathing hard beside the broken pipe while freezing water flooded into the snow around his boots. Then his flashlight beam caught something else nailed to the pump house wall. A folded piece of paper. He ripped it free. Typed words stared back at him beneath the flashlight. "Leave Bitter Creek before someone else burns." No signature. None needed. Titan growled low beside him while wind rolled through the frozen valley. And somewhere beyond the dark tree line, someone was still watching the ranch. The wind carried through the pines with a low, hollow sound that reminded Ethan too much of distant rotor blades. Titan stood rigid beside the shattered pump line, staring into the darkness beyond the eastern ridge. The German shepherd's fur bristled along his spine, waiting, tracking. Ethan folded the warning note carefully and slid it into his jacket pocket. Then he shut off the flashlight. Darkness swallowed the valley instantly. Most people feared darkness because they couldn't see danger inside it. Ethan feared it because he could. The old instincts returned effortlessly now. Movement patterns, approach angles, possible sniper positions near the ridgeline, escape routes from the barn toward the creek. Years ago, those instincts kept him alive overseas. Tonight, they might keep everyone else alive too. Titan suddenly growled, low, focused. Ethan followed the dog's stare toward the trees. For half a second, he saw it. A flashlight beam, gone instantly. Someone was definitely still out there, watching, testing. Ethan backed slowly toward the farmhouse. Titan never took his eyes off the woods. Inside, Luke had already lit oil lamps throughout the kitchen, while Naomi wrapped blankets around the windows to block cold air leaking through the frames. The farmhouse looked different now. Not warm anymore. Prepared. Temporary. Like people bracing for impact. Luke looked up immediately when Ethan entered. Well? They destroyed the water line. The teenager cursed quietly beneath his breath. Naomi closed her eyes briefly. They're trying to wear us down. No, Ethan answered calmly. They're trying to scare us out before something bigger. Titan paced near the back door again. The dog refused to settle now. Ethan noticed the pattern immediately. Every escalation from Redwater was getting closer. First the barn, then the house, then direct threats, which meant Damien Crowe was losing patience. That usually meant time was running short. Outside, the wind strengthened again. Snow swept violently across Bitter Creek Valley, while clouds swallowed the moon overhead. Another storm coming, and this one sounded worse. Ethan moved toward the old weather radio sitting near the stove. Static crackled through the speaker. Then the emergency alert finally came through. Historic winter conditions expected across western Montana. Whiteout conditions. Roads impassable. Emergency travel restrictions. Luke looked toward the windows nervously. How bad? Ethan listened to the wind. Bad enough. Naomi sank slowly into the kitchen chair. The valley hasn't seen a storm like that since the flood year. Those words lingered heavily. Titan barked sharply toward the porch. Headlights appeared through the snow, fast, approaching hard. Luke jumped to his feet. Who's that? Ethan moved instantly toward the window. A sheriff truck slid sideways through the drifting snow outside before stopping near the porch. Clara Boone burst from the driver's side, already fighting the wind. Ethan opened the door before she reached it. The deputy stepped inside, breathing hard. We've got a problem. Her expression said enough already. Titan sniffed her quickly. Anxiety, fear, urgency. Clara brushed snow from her jacket. Damien Crowe disappeared this afternoon. Luke frowned. What does that mean? It means Redwater's cleaning house. Clara lowered her voice. State investigators started asking questions after I forwarded copies of the flood files. Ethan's jaw tightened. So Crowe runs? No. Clara looked toward him carefully. Men like Crowe don't run. They erase problems before investigators arrive. Silence filled the kitchen. Outside, the storm screamed harder against the ranch. Titan suddenly moved toward Clara's truck, visible through the window. The deputy noticed. What? The dog barked once sharply. Ethan stepped outside with Clara behind him. Snow whipped across the yard almost sideways now. Titan stood beside the sheriff truck, growling toward the rear bumper. Ethan crouched lower. Then saw it. Thin black wires running beneath the frame. His pulse slowed instantly. Back up! Clara's face drained pale. What is it? Explosive rig. The deputy stumbled backward through the snow. Ethan knelt carefully near the bumper, while Titan remained perfectly still beside him. Military training returned automatically. Assess trigger, check pressure lines. Watch for secondary traps. The device looked crude but deadly enough. Homemade. Probably remote-triggered, which meant somebody nearby could already be watching. Ethan cut the ignition cable first, then disconnected the blasting cap slowly beneath the frozen frame. Finally, he exhaled. Done. Clara stared at him in disbelief. You disarmed bombs before? Ethan stood slowly. A few. The deputy looked shaken now. They tried to kill me. No, Ethan answered quietly. They tried to stop you from getting those files out. Titan suddenly snapped his head toward the ridgeline, barking violently. Then the first gunshot cracked through the storm. Glass exploded inward across the farmhouse kitchen window. Luke shouted. Naomi screamed. Ethan shoved Clara down into the snow instantly. Inside! Move! Another shot ripped through the darkness. Closer. The ranch lights shattered near the porch. Titan barked furiously toward the woods, while Ethan dragged Clara behind the truck for cover. The storm swallowed visibility almost completely now. Perfect conditions for an attack. Professional. Calculated. Ethan's heartbeat remained terrifyingly calm. Same feeling before firefights overseas. The world narrowing into angles and survival. Stay low, he ordered Clara. Then he ran. Bullets snapped through the snow somewhere near the barn ruins, while Ethan sprinted toward the house. Titan raced beside him like a shadow. Luke yanked the front door open seconds before Ethan crashed inside. Down! Ethan shouted. Everyone hit the floor as another shot blasted through the front window. Naomi trembled near the stove. Luke looked pale with terror. Clara burst through the doorway behind Ethan, clutching her sidearm. How many? Ethan listened carefully. Wind, snow, movement outside. At least 2. Titan growled toward the eastern wall. Then suddenly the entire ranch went dark again. The backup generator died. Damn it! The house vanished into blackness, except for oil lamps flickering weakly near the kitchen. Outside, the blizzard intensified into full whiteout conditions. Visibility dropped almost completely, which meant the attackers could move closer unseen. Ethan looked toward Luke. Basement, now! The teenager hesitated. What about you? Go. Naomi grabbed Luke's arm and hurried him toward the cellar stairs, while Clara covered the hallway with her pistol. Titan remained beside Ethan, waiting, always waiting. Another sound drifted through the storm. Not gunfire this time. Engines. Multiple vehicles approaching the ranch road. Ethan moved carefully toward the broken window. Headlights appeared faintly through blowing snow beyond the eastern pasture. 3 trucks, coming fast. His stomach tightened. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was cleanup. Clara saw them too. Oh God! Ethan's voice stayed calm. How much ammo you carrying? The deputy checked quickly. Not enough. Me neither. Titan barked sharply toward the barn ruins. Then the first truck smashed through the ranch gate. Men jumped out wearing winter masks and carrying rifles. 5. Maybe 6 total, too many. The storm swallowed their faces completely. But Ethan already understood something terrifying. Redwater wasn't trying to scare them anymore. They were here to erase the ranch entirely. Titan growled deep beside him. The German shepherd's body coiled tight like a spring. Ethan rested one hand briefly against the dog's neck, then looked toward the burning remains of Bitter Creek Ranch outside the shattered window. The storm had finally become war. Snow blasted sideways across the ranch as armed men spread through the whiteout beyond the broken fence line. Ethan counted silhouettes through the storm. 5. Maybe 6, hard to tell in the blizzard. Professional enough to stay spread apart. Professional enough to cut power before approaching. Titan stood rigid beside him, teeth exposed now beneath a low growl that vibrated through the dark farmhouse. Clara crouched near the shattered window with her pistol raised. They're surrounding the house. I know. Luke and Naomi remained hidden near the cellar stairs behind the kitchen wall. The teenager clutched an oil lantern with shaking hands while Naomi whispered quiet prayers under her breath. Another gunshot shattered the porch light outside. Darkness swallowed the ranch completely. Only headlights cutting through snow remained now. Ethan's breathing slowed. Cold. Steady. Combat mode. Every instinct inside him sharpened until fear disappeared entirely. He turned toward Clara. "You still trust me?" The deputy looked at him like the answer was obvious. "Yes." "Then listen carefully." Ethan pointed toward the rear cellar door. "If they breach the house, you take Naomi and Luke through the storm cellar tunnel under the barn." Clara frowned. "There's another exit?" "Old drainage route leading toward the frozen creek." Luke looked stunned. "You never told us that." "I didn't know until tonight." Titan barked sharply. Movement outside. Closer now. Heavy boots crunching through snow near the porch. Ethan grabbed the old ranch rifle from the table. The wooden stock felt strange in his hands after years carrying military weapons overseas. But weight was weight, and tonight survival mattered more than comfort. The front door handle moved slowly. Testing. Titan lunged toward it, barking violently. Then the first attacker kicked the door inward hard enough to splinter wood across the room. Everything exploded into motion. Ethan fired once. The rifle blast thundered through the farmhouse while the masked man stumbled backward into the snow outside. Another attacker opened fire through the doorway. Glass shattered, wood splintered. Naomi screamed. Titan shot forward like a missile through smoke and darkness. The German shepherd slammed into the second intruder before the Maku could fully enter the house. The attacker crashed hard against the porch railing as Titan locked onto his arm with terrifying force. The rifle fell into the snow. "Move!" Ethan shouted. Clara grabbed Naomi while Luke snatched the evidence folders from the kitchen table. Another burst of gunfire ripped through the walls. The attackers were pushing closer. Titan released the man outside only after Ethan called sharply, "Titan, back!" The dog obeyed instantly, retreating into the house beside Ethan while growling furiously. Blood stained the snow near the porch now. The attackers regrouped beyond visibility. Waiting, calculating, professional. One voice shouted through the storm, "Give us the files and this ends peacefully." Ethan almost laughed. Men carrying rifles through a blizzard rarely came for peaceful endings. Clara looked toward him. "What now?" Before Ethan could answer, another explosion rocked the ranch. The equipment shed near the water pump erupted into flames. Orange fire rolled upward into the storm night. Distraction. Diversion. The attackers wanted movement. Wanted confusion. Ethan knew the tactic immediately. Luke looked terrified now. "They're gonna burn everything." Ethan stared toward the fire outside. "No." His voice hardened dangerously. "Not tonight." Then another sound cut through the storm. Truck engines. More headlights approaching the ranch road. Clara's face drained pale. "More of them?" Ethan listened carefully. Different engines. Older trucks. Then voices carried faintly through the snow. "Sheriff's office!" Clara blinked in confusion. 2 county vehicles burst through the storm beyond the western ridge, emergency lights flashing weakly beneath the blizzard. "Deputies, back up." Gunfire erupted again immediately outside as the attackers scattered toward the tree line. One masked man sprinted toward the ruined barn carrying a duffel bag. Titan saw him first. The dog barked sharply and bolted through the broken doorway into the storm. "Titan!" Ethan chased after him instantly. Snow blinded everything beyond 20 feet. The masked figure disappeared briefly between burned support beams near the barn ruins. Then Ethan heard Luke scream behind him. The teenager stood near the porch, pointing toward the stable. "Titan!" A gunshot cracked through the blizzard. Then another. Ethan sprinted harder. Inside the ruined barn, Collapsing timbers groaned dangerously beneath heavy snow and lingering fire damage. Titan cornered the masked man near the hidden cellar entrance. The attacker raised his rifle toward the dog. "No!" Titan lunged anyway. The rifle discharged. The blast echoed violently through the barn. The attacker crashed backward against the broken stall wall as Titan slammed into him full force. But the dog cried out sharply, a sound Ethan had never heard before. Pain. Real pain. "Titan!" Ethan reached them seconds later and tackled the attacker hard into the snow-covered debris. The masked man fought viciously, trying to reach a sidearm beneath his coat. Ethan drove one brutal punch into the man's jaw, then another. Years of rage finally surfaced all at once. His parents, the flood, the fire, Naomi, Luke, Titan bleeding in the snow. The attacker finally gasped. "Crow said burn the ranch." Ethan froze. The man saw the hesitation and lunged again toward the pistol. Titan growled through pain and clamped onto the man's wrist before he could fire. Deputies burst into the barn seconds later with Clara behind them. "Drop it!" The attacker finally surrendered, but Ethan barely noticed, because Titan had collapsed beside the ruined stall. Blood stained the dog's shoulder dark against the snow. Luke rushed into the barn behind Clara. "Oh, God!" Ethan dropped instantly beside Titan. The German shepherd tried to stand anyway, still protecting. Always protecting. "Easy, buddy." Ethan's voice cracked slightly for the first time all night. "Easy." Titan whined softly and pressed weakly against Ethan's chest. Clara crouched beside them quickly. "Bullet went through the shoulder. Can you fix it?" "I can stabilize him." Her expression tightened. "But he needs surgery fast." Outside, the storm worsened again. Roads vanished beneath drifting snow. No ambulances could reach Bitter Creek now. No helicopters. Nothing. Luke looked near tears. "He can't die." Titan lifted his head weakly at the sound of Luke's voice. Even injured, the dog still looked toward the boy protectively. The deputies dragged the captured attacker outside while Clara worked quickly wrapping pressure bandages around Titan's shoulder. Ethan remained beside the dog the entire time, one hand resting against thick fur soaked with melting snow and blood. The same dog that dragged wounded civilians from collapsed buildings overseas. The same dog that woke Ethan from nightmares when nobody else could. The same dog that refused to leave the barn because he knew the truth had been buried there all along. Titan looked up at Ethan weakly, trusting him completely, and somehow that hurt worse than the blood. Clara finally looked up. "We need antibiotics and surgical supplies from county storage. The roads are closed." "I know." Silence settled heavily around the ruined barn. Then Clara stood slowly. "I'll go." Ethan looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "In this storm?" "He won't survive till morning otherwise." Luke stepped closer immediately. "I'm coming too." "No," Ethan and Clara both said together. Titan whimpered softly beside them. The blizzard howled through the broken barn walls while deputies secured the ranch perimeter outside. Then Ethan suddenly remembered something. The final cassette tape. His father's voice. The hidden message still unfinished. He looked toward the cellar entrance beneath the stall, then back toward Titan. Something deep inside him already knew. His father had left more than evidence hidden beneath Bitter Creek Ranch, and somehow, Titan had known it from the very beginning. The realization stayed with Ethan through the rest of the night. The blizzard raged across Bitter Creek Valley without mercy, while deputies secured the ranch perimeter, and Clara Boone disappeared into the storm, searching for medical supplies that might save Titan's life. Inside the farmhouse, the old world seemed to hold its breath. Luke sat beside the couch, where Titan lay wrapped in blankets near the stove. The German shepherd's breathing remained shallow, but steady, while Naomi carefully changed warm compresses beneath Clara's bandages. Every few minutes, Titan lifted his head searching for Ethan, making sure he was still there. Ethan never moved far. Not this time. The burned scent from the barn still clung to his clothes while blood stained both sleeves of his jacket. Exhaustion weighed heavily across his body, but sleep felt impossible now. Too much had happened. Too much had finally become clear. Near dawn, the storm eased just enough for Clara's sheriff truck headlights to reappear through the snow outside. Luke nearly sprinted to the porch. "She made it!" Clara stumbled inside, carrying medical cases and emergency antibiotics, her face pale from cold and exhaustion. "The roads are gone," she muttered breathlessly. "Almost lost the truck twice." But she smiled faintly when she saw Titan still alive. "Tough dog." The surgery lasted nearly 2 hours on the kitchen table beneath lantern light. Naomi assisted quietly with practiced hands from her nursing years, while Luke held flashlights whenever the power flickered weakly from the backup generator. Ethan remained beside Titan the entire time, silent, watching, the same way Titan once watched over him during nightmares overseas. Outside, the storm slowly began weakening with the coming sunrise. Inside the farmhouse, Clara finally stepped back from the table and removed her gloves. "He's gonna make it." Luke let out a shaky breath that sounded dangerously close to tears. Naomi sat down heavily in relief. But Ethan didn't move at first. His hand remained resting gently against Titan's neck, while the German shepherd slept beneath layers of blankets and stitched bandages. Alive. Scarred. Still here. Clara touched Ethan's shoulder softly. "You should get some rest." But Ethan's eyes drifted toward the cassette recorder sitting near the fireplace. The unfinished tape waited there. So did the rest of the truth. Hours later, while Luke and Naomi finally slept upstairs, Ethan sat alone in the hidden cellar beneath the ruined barn. Titan lay beside him despite the injury, refusing to stay behind in the farmhouse. The lantern light flickered softly across concrete walls, while snowmelt dripped somewhere above through damaged wood. Ethan inserted the final cassette tape again. Static crackled. Then his father's voice returned through the darkness. "If you're hearing this, son." A tired breath followed. "Then things probably got worse than I hoped." Ethan stared quietly at the recorder. "I know you think leaving Bitter Creek was a mistake." His father coughed softly. "Truth is, I wanted you gone." That surprised him. The tape continued. "You were already carrying enough darkness before the Navy ever found you." A faint laugh. "Your mother used to say you took the weight of the whole world personally." Ethan lowered his eyes. "Titan's bloodline came through an old military rescue breeding program years ago," his father continued. "Funny thing is, I helped train some of the wilderness search dogs they started with." Ethan looked down at Titan immediately. The German shepherd rested quietly beside him, listening to the familiar voice. "I recognized something in Titan the first time you brought him home." Another pause. "Dogs like him don't just guard places. They guard people. Truth. Memory." Snow shifted softly above the ruined barn. Then his father's voice lowered. "So I hid everything here because deep down, I knew if anybody ever came back for the truth, it would be you." A long silence followed. "And if Titan stayed beside you this long?" Another tired breath. "Then maybe you finally found something worth staying for." Ethan shut his eyes tightly. The words hit harder than the firefight, harder than the flood photographs, because his father had known him completely, even then. The tape crackled again one final time. "If you found this, son," his father's voice softened almost to a whisper, "then you finally stopped running." The recording ended. Silence filled the cellar. Titan slowly rested his head against Ethan's leg. For several long minutes, Ethan couldn't speak. Outside, dawn finally broke across Bitter Creek Valley. Spring arrived slowly after that. Not all at once. Little things first. Snow melting from fence posts. Mud replacing ice along the ranch road. Cold river water flowing beneath cracked winter banks. Federal investigators descended on Redwater Minerals within weeks after Clara released copies of the flood evidence to state authorities and national reporters. The story exploded across Montana, then across the country. Illegal dumping, corporate intimidation, sabotaged safety reports, hidden flood warnings. Arrests followed quickly after. Several Redwater executives were taken into custody, while state investigators reopened dozens of land seizure cases throughout Bitter Creek Valley. Damian Crow disappeared before warrants reached him, but this time he disappeared alone. The valley no longer feared him. At Bitter Creek Ranch, life slowly rebuilt itself from the ruins. Neighbors arrived almost daily once the snow cleared. Ranchers brought lumber. Veterans brought tools. Families brought food. Even people Ethan never met before drove long distances just to help rebuild the burned stable. Luke worked beside them every day after school. The teenager smiled more now, laughed sometimes. Titan followed him constantly across the ranch, despite the healing shoulder injury. The scar remained visible beneath his fur, but somehow it only made the dog look wiser, stronger. Naomi planted wildflowers beside Ethan's parents' graves near the western ridge once spring warmed the ground enough for soil to soften. One afternoon, Ethan found her there, quietly brushing dirt from the headstones. "You gave this place back its heartbeat," she told him softly. But Ethan shook his head. No. His eyes drifted toward the ranch below. All of us did. By early summer, the rebuilt western stable stood finished beneath bright Montana skies. But Ethan no longer wanted Bitter Creek Ranch to become only a private home again. Too many people needed places to survive. Too many veterans returned from war with nowhere left to belong. So the ranch became something new. Part shelter, part recovery refuge, temporary housing for homeless veterans, emergency space for displaced families during harsh winters. And beside the rebuilt stable, Ethan and Luke started a small rescue training program for retired working dogs abandoned after service careers ended. Titan became the center of all of it. Children from nearby towns visited constantly just to see the legendary German Shepherd who saved people during the Bitter Creek siege. Titan accepted the attention patiently now, older somehow, at peace. One warm evening near sunset, Ethan carried a repaired wooden sign toward the ranch entrance. The original Bitter Creek Ranch sign his father built decades earlier had survived the fire, badly damaged but repairable. Luke helped steady the post while Ethan tightened the final bolts into place. The mountains glowed gold beneath the Montana sunset, while wind rolled gently through the valley grass. Naomi stood nearby, smiling softly. Titan rested beside the porch, watching all of them quietly. For the first time since Ethan returned home, the dog no longer stared at the barn. Luke noticed too. "You think Titan knew all along?" Ethan looked toward the rebuilt stable glowing warmly beneath the evening light, then down at the scarred old German Shepherd beside him. A faint smile finally touched his face. "I think," he said quietly, "he was waiting for me to come home." Titan slowly stood, walked away from the barn one final time, and lay peacefully beside the porch steps beneath the Montana sunset, while Bitter Creek Ranch stood alive around them. Not haunted anymore. Home. If you believe a man should never have to fight alone for his family, his land, or the truth, type yes down in the comments. And if you've ever had a place that still felt like home no matter how long you stayed away, share where you're watching from tonight. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy stories about courage, loyal dogs, second chances, and ordinary Americans standing their ground when it matters most.